My name is Cedric, and we will be going over the simple calculator demo. So as we would be able to see here, is that these are all functioning buttons, um, and we would be able to use it as an actual calculator, right? So how is this being done? So it's broken onto sections. We would have a general section here, which all of these operators, where all these operators are functioning, right? Um, but it's not really the button that these are controlling. These are controlling these functions here are are is controlling what's happening when we do the operation, right? So, for example, we would be able to have this square root. Let's look into the square root function here, right? So this square root function, as its operation, right, we would be um, getting its its value that is being seen in this entry box, right? And whatever value is there, right, except for throwing in an error, if there's nothing to complain about in terms of the computer, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? Except for doing that, we would be able to do the operation, right? If there's nothing wrong, right? And there's something to compute. So in this context, right, we would be using the math function so that we could operate with the square root, right? So then that's how this would be operating, right? And um, with this little demo here, I've applied two additional functions, right? So these pretty much all have the same format because we want to make sure that we do not have any syntax error, or else this GUI could potentially crash, right? If we do not have any repercussions, right? So this is more of a safety net for us, which is being included to all these operator functions, right? And we would have to, all these, we would have to say that we are taking in a value and we're working with a certain value, right? So that's very important to understand. Uh, but here underneath this else function, this is what we're doing. And for this one, I call this my reciprocal our function. And what I did here was I just took the value, the value that was being set here, right? That would be seen in the entry, right? So our value, I would take my value, and I would just take that over 1, right? Um, and that would be our reciprocal function, right? And then I also did a sign function here, where look here in the else function, I just used the math function again. I just did math.sign. But the thing about this math function, this math sign function, is that our output is going to be in radians, right? So that's something that we would have to be aware about. Um, which if the user were to actually use this, they would have to be aware of that, that the answer would not be in degrees, but radians, right? So this is the functionality of all these other ones. Um, so yes, and then of course these are very important too. This is our clear all function, right? Which of course if I were to do 5636, right, we would expect this to do all clear, which it does wipe everything out, which is what this function does here. And then when we do, uh, let's say we have like 63.6, right? This one will just take out a value from this quote unquote integer array, right? So it will take one of them out, right? So that's what that's going to be doing. And then this is making sure that whatever um, is being inserted, whatever value is being inserted into the end here, right, of the text area. And so going uh, so we already went over the operations, right? So now we're looking over the button generation, right? Um, so here we would be using a button function, right? Which we would be going over its width, its height, um, what we are recalling to, and as well as its position as in our row and column, right? And how much of its width we'd be taking over, right? Um, so we'll just break it down here. So in here, our equal operator button, right, would have a width 10, which is why it's pretty big and kind of stubby in terms of height, right? Um, and again, we would be making well, the way I approached this calculator is made sure that my font was gray and my background was white. So that's why it just has more of a simplistic taste to it. Um, and we had made sure that this, when we use the button, we would be doing it with this operation in mind, right? So this command basically controls how the operation of the button is what it's doing, right? And this goes for all of them, right? Again, we would be again for like this addition sign, right? We would have its width, its location, how it's being operated, and which function it's being called with, right? And then we would have also its font and its background, right? Um, but yeah, that's basically what would be happening with all these buttons, right? And then just to show this with our new functions, right? Uh, such as the reciprocal function and our sine, our radians function, right? Sine with radians. We would be able to see here that we created the tile text for the button, 1 over x, and then I chose this size, and I went with, again, gray and white with the respective font and background. And then shows this font size. And again, the important part is to make sure that it fulfills its operation here, right? So again, I recall upon the actual function that would do its operation. So I would call this out, right? And again, I would be able to see here that if I were to do like let's clear all this. So if I were to do like 1 over 3, or actually, if I were to actually do, let me actually clear all this, right? So to show that it actually works, right? Let's say if I wanted to find the reciprocal of 3, right? The reciprocal of 3 is 1/3, right? So we would be expecting 0.33333, right? So we would do this, and that is what we get, right? So this new operation is working properly, right? And what about our sine function, right? If we wanted to test our sine function, we could do, uh, since we're working with radians, we don't really have a pi button here, so we could do uh, pi over 2, right? So our expected value for pi over 2 is 1, right? So to make sure that we get pi over 2, we would do 3.14 divided by 2, right? And then we would have that value in radians. And we would see that sine pi over 2, or sine 90 degrees, right, would be 1, which is what is occurring here. It's pretty much 1, right? So that operation is working, right? So that's how everything's working. It seems like we received our expected output for our new defined functions, and everything is operating as it should.